For more on the day's big news, here's insider Darren Dreger. Darren, Michael Andlauer didn't hold back at all. He used words like embarrassed and negligent, but he did call the loss of the first-round pick a very strong price to pay. Why was it so important to make this punishment so severe from the league standpoint?
Well, because of how mismanaged it was from Ottawa's standpoint. And this is a tough one for the new owner of the Ottawa Senators. I think we can all appreciate that. But I think, Gino, you have to look at it from Vegas's perspective as well, right? It was like they had dirty hands in this transaction. That wasn't the case at all. When you make that trade call, and in this case between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Anaheim Ducks and the Ottawa Senators ultimately involved, you're working on good faith. The information that was supplied by the Ottawa Senators was incorrect. They said that they didn't have the appropriate trade information, and the agent for Dadonov supplied that information, that proof that Ottawa, in fact, did have that. So the National Hockey League initially approves the trade between Vegas to Anaheim and then has to void it. This was a bad look for the NHL, but more importantly, a worse look for the Ottawa Senators because it was mismanaged, and because of that, there had to be severe penalty.
It's important to point out while he accepted the punishment, he did have some questions surrounding the timing and the process, though.
He did. Again, Michael Andlauer, the owner of the Ottawa Senators, takes responsibility, but he did that. And you're right, kind of asking the question that was asked of him by a media member. You've got to ask the National Hockey League why it took so long to reach a conclusion to the sanction. What I would submit to this, look, we know that the commissioner's office is inundated with all sorts of things that aren't often reported. In this case, we followed it pretty closely. So I'm not suggesting that this wasn't a priority for the NHL. What I am reporting is that Michael Andlauer would have known the severity of this situation and what the likely end result was in terms of the punitive decision made by the NHL prior to him taking sole ownership or ownership of the Ottawa Senators.
Andlauer also said Pierre Dorion's actions embarrassed the league and pissed off two other NHL clubs. Was Dorion already on his way out, or did this ultimately seal his fate?
Well, it seems like it was inevitable. Again, Dorion was at the end of his contract. So, it felt like there was likely going to be a change. But I think you also have to be mindful here of new ownership coming in. Steve Staios introduced after new ownership. So Staios was brought in to kind of oversee hockey operations. Well, he needs time to get to know everybody and get to know what works, get to know what doesn't work. And I don't think that enough time has passed for them to make a conclusion that Pierre Dorion is not the right man for the job. They've announced that it was a mutual decision, that effectively Pierre Dorion has resigned. But you got to believe that, everything that's gone on over the last several weeks, this being the end of that, encouraged the decision. But I will say this, somewhat in support of Pierre Dorion. He went through some pretty difficult and dark times under the watch of Eugene Melnyk, the previous owner of the Ottawa Senators. He did some good things. He made his mistakes. But again, it feels like this may have been the final straw.
I want to follow up on Staios. So he takes over on an interim basis right now. Is he a serious candidate for the full-time job, or where do you think they go from here?
Well, it's a curious question, Gino. And if you were asking this a couple of months down the road, I would say 100% he is a serious contender. And I don't have reason to suggest that he shouldn't be a serious contender other than the timing. You do have to look back at the history here. The relationship between Michael Andlauer and Steve Staios, that is a deep one. There's a high level of trust. Can Steve Staios do the job? Dual roles? 100%. There's no question he can do that. Timing-wise, is he comfortable? Does he need to learn more about the inner workings of the Ottawa Senators and the Belleville Senators and the operation, the full organization of the Ottawa Senators? Probably. But he did also acknowledge, Staios that is, that they're going to have a look at what their options might be. Maybe it's internal. Maybe it's somebody like Ryan Bonus, who's an assistant general manager in Ottawa. But they will do their due diligence. They will look long and hard at what the options might be. But Steve Staios 100% needs to be considered a strong candidate.
So the work continues in our nation's capital. Hockey insider Darren Dreger.